Hello and welcome to Practical Christian Lessons. We are talking about ancient covenants today. Let's get into it. So if you are new here, I am Josh Pearsall and this is Practical Christian Lessons. We do a lot of things here: history, theology, apologetics, and today we are doing a bit of all of those. This is the NIV Zondervan Archaeological Study Bible. It's important you get the archaeological if you're looking for this. It is not the archaeology one. It's also out of print, so it might be a bit pricier. This series is going through theology of the Old Testament and comparing it with its neighbors to show it's not just a development of ideas from their neighbors. They're not stealing ideas from their neighbors. This isn't some kind of evolution of thought. Like, this isn't like the natural trajectory one would take with the theology of the ancient Near East of their neighbors. So it's things like their pantheon. They have a pantheon of gods instead of one true deity, things like this. So this one is interesting. So this is Deuteronomy in the covenant treaty form. This is on page 255 in the opening of Deuteronomy. And I'm also going to be talking about the Ten Commandments, the 10 words, Mount Sinai episode today as well after we finish this, because it ties into this as well. And this also matters into how you read Deuteronomy 32, 33, Moses' final sermon. Anyway, Deuteronomy 1 is where this is starting us off here. We're not reading it, that's just where it houses this essay. International treaties drafted between suzerains, overlords, and vassals, subject peoples, during the 14th and 13th centuries BC closely parallel the structure of the book of Deuteronomy. And they also have a glossary. If you need to know what a suzerain or a vassal is, feel free to just comment that below and I'll share you their glossary entry, and I can also, of course, just give my own definition. The best preserved examples of these treaties come from the Hittites, but treaties from Mesopotamia, Syria, and Egypt demonstrate that a similar form was commonly used. The suzerain, vassal, the overlord, and the subject people form a treaty also defined the relationship of God, suzerain, to his people, the vassals, as evidenced in the overall form, as well as the content of Deuteronomy. The Hittite treaties of the 14th through 13th centuries BC differ somewhat from later Assyrian treaties of the 8th through 7th centuries BC. In these later treaties, the historical prologue and the blessings disappear. A greater emphasis is placed on the curses, and the order of elements is more variable. Deuteronomy's closer connection to the earlier treaties confirms that this book was written during the Mosaic period, not in Israel's late monarchic period, late 7th century, as many scholars contend. And they have a date of Deuteronomy thing here, but you can read tons of works on that. If you just put that into a Google search bar, you will find people like to have their debates. Furthermore, Deuteronomy's close correspondence of form to these earlier treaties strongly suggest that the book should be considered an essential literary unit rather than a later composite of materials from various sources. So that's sort of taking a jab there at the documentary hypothesis, which is funk anyway. If you look at the end of this video, or just go to the playlist on our channel, The Bible is History, Not Myth, is where we house the videos from this series. You'll find our video on the documentary hypothesis. Where'd my bookmark go? The suzerain treaties function in a specific way. As they're talking about, they're a treaty between an overlord and then a vassal. Often, this was also used in war. When two peoples would fight, a treaty would be formed. Well, whoever was the winner would be the suzerains in this case, and they would make 2 copies of a treaty. And one would go to the temple of the conquered people and be housed in the temple of their deity, and then the suzerains, the conquerors, would then put a copy in their temple, and it would be like the 2 gods here, or the pantheon, whatever. But generally, the prime deity of whatever area is the one who is going to be like the witness to this treaty, right? That's the idea behind it there. Well, what you see in the 10 Commandments, and of course in Deuteronomy, is that same model, sort of. It gets tweaked at Sinai, right? So at Sinai, right, Moses goes up the mountain and he gets the 2 stone tablets. And whatever's written on them is written on them. That is following the form of a suzerain treaty. However, instead of going to two separate places, right, the Israelites, the Hebrews, they don't keep their own copy. Both copies go into the ark as, the statement, the Lord is the witness, right? It sort of pulls on the same imagery when there's the episode when God talks to Abraham in Genesis, it might be 12, it might be 15, where he makes the treaty with Abraham, and how they signed treaties back then is they would kill animals, and then spread them apart, and generally, the one who would be in the position of, if you break this treaty, right, you'll walk through this. What happened to these animals will happen to you if you break this. Generally, what would have to happen, though, is you'd have to do that in front of someone of a higher power to you, because that would be the one who holds you accountable. Well, God's the one making this treaty. He's the one making the conditions with Abraham. Abraham has no conditions, right? He's promised this. So God is the only one who goes and walks through the animals, because he's the only one who can be his own witness in a counter of sorts. As the prophet Jeremiah calls out, as from the Lord, speaking through Jeremiah, who can summon me to court? And watch our Divine Messiah video that'll be coming out. I actually bring that up. There's very important notes with that specific phrasing, especially in relation to the book of Job. But that's what's happening at Sinai too. And this is actually, I would argue personally, a monotheistic claim in depending on how you define monotheistic. I'll get to that in a second. Where the Lord is saying, no one else can be a witness of the same level as me here. I am the only deity here that can witness this. There is no other deity that will do what I am doing here. That's why both of the tablets are placed in this. I would argue that's what's happening there, right? This is a monotheistic claim. Monotheistic being not denying the existence of these other beings, but saying that they are not God or true deity. They are created beings. They are not the creators. They are what the Lord himself made. Generally, as Paul would call them, demons. That is what's going on here, I would argue. And I think this is a big, important emphasis on that. And that's how, right, this is one of those weird things where historical background and context of what these things are plays a really big role into how you view an episode. That also impacts how we're viewing what's happening at these scenes, right? We're viewing this not only as the Lord forming a covenant with his people, he's making a treaty with his people. He is now their overlord. He's the one who's above them, right? On and on and on. Looking into this historical context enlightens how you're reading these scenes and what's happening here. It also really plays into what's happening in Deuteronomy 30. I want to say it's 33. It might be 32. Where Moses is like repeating back to the people, hey, this is the covenant you are in. This is the treaty. Here are the terms. Here are the conditions. And if you break it, you must bear in mind what will happen to you. And that's why, every year, one of the things that they would sing was a condemnation should they break the covenant. And as they were was prophetically told them, right, you will sing this as your witness against yourself. And it is coincidentally, right, the song about what happens if you betray God, the covenant curses, it's the same thing being sung the time Jesus is crucified. So, important things there. And there's a lot we could get into, and I just don't have time because we'd sit here for a very long time if I decided to start delving into Suzerain Treaties. I will link a book, though, below from my introduction into the Old Testament class that talked about the Suzerain Treaties, if I can remember which one it was. But I will find a book and link it below that talks about this and some other things that was really helpful, and put those in there. But yeah, so right, interesting notes on what a Suzerain Treaty is and how it's impacting these things. And just a quick note on Deuteronomy, since this is like the introductory essay into Deuteronomy. When you're reading Deuteronomy, a good book that speaks on what I'm about to talk about is How to Study Scripture's Use of Scripture. I believe that's what it's called. I really wish I knew where that book was. It's somewhere in this office. But it's about how the Bible, like Scripture, uses itself. So Deuteronomy is often commenting on Exodus and Leviticus laws. And the best way to understand that, right, isn't just Moses is repeating things, because often you get additional commentary and attached to these. Well, it's Moses explicating, right? He is pointing to what has come, and now he's, as they described it, right, he's exegeting the past. He's saying, here's the laws you've been given. here's what's happened. And as a lot of people have commented on as they work from Exodus through Deuteronomy, right? The people get more and more stipulations added onto them, the more and more rebellious they are. And a lot of people think that's also part of what Moses is doing here. As these stipulations are being given, he's also exegeting on those older laws and saying, hey, this is the heart behind these things. This is what these are for. This is what they're pointing towards. You know this. I know you know this. You are being rebellious and you need to stop. And of course they don't. Continue reading the Old Testament and you see that story there. But that's sort of what's going on here in the book of Deuteronomy. There's a lot here, right? It's history, it's theology, and it's Moses trying to, as the tool of God, trying to help form these people into the people of God that they are supposed to be. As Paul tells the Corinthians, right, you are saints, therefore start acting like you are saints. Live a life according to the holiness you have. Live a life in accordance with, or in alignment with, however some of your translations might put that there. But he's telling them, you are called out by God. You are separate from God. You are holy. So now you must start acting holy. You must start being holy. You must start living out that holiness. You cannot simply live as you did before. And that's what's happening here. And that really is the story of the church time and time again. We're in that same spot now today. But enough diatribes and tangents and ramblings. You guys have a wonderful day. God bless. See you next time.